Welcome everyone. My name is Taavi Einaste and I'm the CEO for Middle East and Africa at Nortal. It's a privilege to welcome all of you from 39 countries globally to our discussion to explore the future of public services in the new post-digital era that we call the personal government. Joining me for the discussion in the studio, we have first Dr. Mihkel Solvak, Associate Professor at the University of Tartu, Mr. Ville Sirviö, CEO of the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions, and Mr. Andres Raieste, Senior Vice President of Public Sector at Nortal. I will be guiding the discussion when we explore how the transition of public sector services or governments towards human-centric, equitable and sustainable public services takes place. To kick off, I have a few questions for our speakers, and that's also a great way to test if your microphones work. First of all, Andres, what is this post-digital that everybody keeps talking about?
It's quite simple to understand if you think about that. We have been talking about digital for maybe 20, 30 years. And for many countries, for many nations, societies, we could say that everything is already digital. And if everything is already digital, that doesn't mean that progress stops there. So this, what comes after the digital, this is something that many societies, large organizations and globally, this is something that interests everybody, what comes after it. And this is something that the society has started calling the post-digital era. So there are very different views what that might mean. And today we'll be exploring how do we see what that might look for the future.
Sounds very exciting. I can't wait. Mihkel. Many governments experience a low level of trust for these modern digital or maybe post-digital services. The conventional wisdom is that trust has to be earned, but can trust in fact be created?
I mean, the conventional wisdom is conventional wisdom because it's usually right, and in that case as well. But obviously there needs to be some sort of basis based on which this service performance can actually earn the trust of people. So technology, people and the procedures governing both technology and people, those are very important to get in place. Then once the service performance sort of happens, it brings what it's supposed to bring, that actually together builds trust and keeps it pretty robust as well.
So we must keep on trying.
Yes.
Thank you. Ville, in this post-digital era, let's call it like this, I mean, you're heavily involved in this. What is the biggest change in public digital infrastructure that you have seen?
Well, I think one of the major changes is that when before, let's say in the public administration, the governments were focusing on building national infrastructures, and it has shifted towards building cross-border infrastructures. And through these developments, I would say the new thing we see coming is data spaces, especially in Europe, but also globally. And I think it's a big change because it's changing our approach into data exchange, into data sharing, into the way how the digital public infrastructures are built. And also currently what I think is increasing is providing digital public infrastructures as a service. That's also something which is trending. So I see this as a new development.
So in a way, the public sector is also moving towards a data and service economy.
Yeah, we could say so, yes.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. I think that's a great introduction for what's to come. We, of course, we will hear from all of you, but we would like this to be an interactive session and give also the opportunity for our listeners globally from 39 countries to listen to, or ask their questions. So for our audiences, please go to the event. So during the presentations, you will be able to see a QR code. I think that will mostly work for those who are joining us from their laptops or desktops. If you're using it from the mobile phone or smartphone, then in the comments section of the event, we will provide a link where you are able to submit your questions. And that should be available throughout the whole event. We will have a separate Q&A session after we have seen all the three presentations. But we are trying to be efficient. So Andres, you will be the first presenter. So very excited to hear what you have to say next.
Thank you. Hi. I'm going to talk about what the post-digital society for us might look like. And we have started to call the post-digital government personal government. Why personal government? Personal government for us explains what we think that might be the future interaction between the citizen or really anybody who is living in a society and between the government. And it's important to explain how did we get here. So the journey towards the post-digital era, it has mostly, we can look at this in 3 phases. So the very first era that everybody are going through, we call that the digitization era. So we could say that we have in Estonia and in other Nordic countries, we've experienced that era maybe from the 2000s to 2010. We call this the e-government. So regularly during that era, we talked about technology such as document management systems. We talked about the citizen experience, mostly being that there were some type of an applications online. And the government itself, that mostly benefited from simply a more efficient information management. And at one point, everybody understood that simply collecting information in a more efficient way, this was not the experience that made truly a difference for the citizen. So after this, the key question became that how can we actually increase the citizen value? How can we make the journey much more pleasant for the citizens themselves? And this is something where it started to merge the digital government, which represented the end-to-end replacement of the analog services. So this is something that transformed fundamentally how the citizen interacts with the government. So that meant that the actual analog offices, the traditional offices, the government front offices, these started to be closed, not really necessary. And generally speaking, the citizen were able to get everything done online. Now, there are several governments in the world that have enjoyed for several years already a situation where, generally speaking, the entire populace is able to mostly get everything done online without ever having to visit the government offices. And now, having had that for several years, the key question is that what comes next? And this, what comes next, this is the question that everybody have started to figure out. And when figuring that what comes after this, we have to look what is the innovation that has already happened throughout the society elsewhere. For example, in private sector, when we explore the different business models that primarily have been innovated in the private sector, and how those might change the expectations that everybody in the society are having. And when we think about it, that if we have the situation where the citizen, especially the younger generations, where they haven't had to ever visit the government offices, we might also expect that the younger generations, they are having entirely different expectations how the future government services might look like. So here is the question that if you would ask your children that what do you expect from the different government services, and many of us have asked that question, then in reality what is the general answer that we will get is in reality something that for us represents best what personal government means. And to explain it very quickly, we have come up with different traits how to explain it. So for us, personal government is human-centric. What we mean by it is that government doesn't need to be complex. We could talk that the government is a single person. We wish from the future that the citizen experience would be that the citizen experiences government as a single person. I should not care about what different government authorities exist, what are the different regulations. I expect that this is made comprehensible for me. The same is that the the means how to consume public sector services is vastly changing. We're currently talking about that we're now having a whole generation of people who soon have actually never even had to use a computer. They use different devices, and in future we're also talking about that innovation comes and devices will change, and we talk about entirely new means how to actually consume those services. Also, with the attention gap, we understand that we need to provide services fast. And in reality, technologies and the database society, that has created a situation where in reality, if a person is reliable for something, we have the ability now to actually provide that immediately. So imagine all the social benefits. If we know that the person is reliable for something, there is no reason why to provide that immediately. Also, generally, what we have learned is that people trust the services if they understand them. And we also understand that people are willing to use new technologies, new means, and new types of services if there are enough incentives for them to give it a try. And if those incentives are good enough, then in reality, these are also creating entirely new type of value propositions for that entirely provide new types of services that might have never even existed before. And all in all, this is what we call personal government. And if the primary purpose for the digital government or the earlier eras of the government was to increase efficiency, then currently we're talking about that how can new services, new types of services, how can they increase, for example, social cohesion, and how can they overall increase the effectiveness of policies overall. Obviously, also this comes with at least similar increase in efficiency and sustainability that we saw when the first types of digitalization and digital public services were created. And overall, this philosophy behind the personal government, what we believe is the post-digital government, we believe that the ideology behind is that all the complexity, to illustrate it, all the complexity of the government generally is hidden. So to depict it, we would utilize, for example, either an iceberg or depicting here as a tree, that all the benefits that the citizen should enjoy, that being represented well by their data, based on which they could be different types of opportunities and obligations can be provided for them, and all the different complexities of the government that the citizen doesn't need to interact with, those being, for example, different types of services, rules, regulations, and so forth, these are hidden from the citizen, and something that the citizen does not need to really interact with because they don't provide any additional value for the citizen. So to do all of this, obviously, all new types of enhanced capabilities are required. So these are primarily evolution from the technologies and methodologies that were already invented for the previous eras of the digital government, but not only in reality. This also means, for example, wider adoption of artificial intelligence, new different types of decoupling service delivery, for example, from the actual registries and government platforms, and so forth. But to really exemplify what we mean, what these new types of services look like, we can look at like examples from entirely different state services. So most services, most governments are having some different types of state portals through which citizens consume public services. So, for example, Estonia has eesti.ee or UK has gov.uk and so forth. So also based on this type of traits that we believe that personal government, what it represents, we can also plot and imagine what is the journey towards the next maturity of this type of public services. And just to give a couple of examples, what we mean by it, for example, that under human centricity, what we mean by it really is that we imagine that the experience for the citizens should be so simple that everything that from the government that is available for you, that should really be available and accessible for the citizen, not more than with 3 clicks or 3 moves of the thumb, not more. All the different documents, all the different opportunities, everything should be available to you all the time immediately. Also, creating a more citizen-centric services, we have also learned that the needs for the different age groups, social groups, they're different. So an 18-year-old might have completely different needs than, for example, an elderly person. So everything in reality, to make it as fast as possible accessible for a person, it should be personalized, and citizens should be able to consume the services that is most relevant for them. Obviously, that doesn't work in every single time, and there are, for example, instances where the issue is that the citizen might not even know what the service is, and this is where new technologies are incredibly helpful. So, for example, it's easier with the artificial intelligence to identify, for example, that there is a trash on a street, for example, identify what is the problem, and immediately report it to the right place. Also, if we look at the different innovation for the public services that we can see already in the different innovation for services that we see in the private sector, and how to adopt similar concepts in the public sector, we can see that these provide opportunities, for example, how to bring different types of services under the same umbrella, so that the citizen has an easier choice between the services and finds the most appropriate service. Good example for this that many nations struggle with is, for example, kindergartens. So different options for childcare available both from the public and private sector. In reality, why not bring them under the same umbrella? Showcasing all the different options that are available for the citizen and integrating both the public and the private sector together. Also, to exemplify the what we mean under the state as a whole, what we mean under giving the citizen a complete view of the government as a whole. That would also require bringing the state financial matters, for example, under the same view. Why do I need to, for example, pay taxes? Why do I need to pay taxes and have social benefits at the same time? We could simply give the citizen a single view for all of this. Of course, all of this is possible only if the citizen retains full control over their personal data. So what already works for some of the leading digital nations in the world is that the citizen has full control and sees in the real time if anybody in the government accesses their personal data, and they're able to give different consent level access, that how this data can be accessed by whom, and if there is any problem about it, then to ask that why that happened. Thank you.
Andres, thank you very much for sharing your experience from working with a lot of governments globally. I think that's very insightful. Our next speaker, Dr. Mihkel. Mihkel, you'll be shedding light on the critical role of trust in these digital services or in the post-digital era. From this perspective, is there evidence that governments or public sector entities that are more transparent, that they create more trust, or people are more likely to trust them?
Absolutely, and that's what international comparative studies have shown. Trust is very highly correlated with transparency, but it's a bit trickier, meaning more transparency necessarily doesn't actually lead to trust, because not everyone is interested in going and checking what is done with their data. Simply the opportunity should be there. But what definitely is bad when there's a lack of transparency. That definitely has a negative association. So you can give people opportunity to take a look at what is being done with their data. That helps. But if you keep them from doing it, then you absolutely undermine trust. So that would be a problem.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Hi, let's talk about trust a bit. So how does trust make a society more efficient? Well, first of all, we need to think about back a bit how these different types of digital societies actually look like. I mean, Andres talked to you about briefly what these historical, let's say, transformations have looked like. In this figure, if you look at the lower left part, you see this traditional e-governance framework. The logic behind that was that back office processes were highly digitalized or are highly digitalized, but the citizen basically is still someone who passively receives information, maybe sometimes also provides information, but in general, this is described as an environment where there is no need for cooperation between the citizen and the particular public institution. And as a result, also, there is not too much trust. When we talk about post-digital and personal government, then actually this sits on the opposite end. This is where we need to have a lot of trust, because actually trust creates cooperation. What does that actually mean? Now, the logic there is that we would like the citizen to internalize the particular service values. What does that actually mean? I mean, services performs by delivering certain types of outputs to the citizen. But the outputs themselves are not the value in the society we are looking for. We are actually looking for specific types of outcomes of these particular outputs. Let me give you a practical example. If someone gets some sort of retraining after a job loss, then the practical output is that they get this new skill and go through this schooling. But the actual outcome we are seeking as a society is that this person actually goes and gets a job and gets into stable employment. So the logic behind that is that the service needs to perform in order for the service to be trusted by the citizens as well. It's both a cause and effect, meaning if I internalize that this particular service will perform the value which I'm sort of looking for, then I'm actually also more likely to strive or go towards trying to get this value out of the service. So basically it's a virtuous circle. Now the personalization part actually plays a very important role here. If a particular service response is highly personalized, then the chances that I actually internalize this particular value that the service should bring are much more likely. I will more likely move or work towards the goal of actually achieving what this service is supposed to bring about. So the performance trust is something that is much more needed when we talk about post-digital or personal state, meaning an active cooperation of the citizen receiving the service in trying to go and attain the actual outcomes which society and the individual obviously would mostly benefit from. Now, let me give you a bit of numerical examples as well, how that is backed up with empirical research. Now, this particular figure is from an OECD study. On the x-axis, you see the share of people who trust, and on the y-axis, you see how much do these particular parameters of a certain service contributes towards more trust. And in the upper right corner, there's actually service satisfaction or performance of the service. None of those other factors which you see on the figure actually get above this 50% threshold. So the number one thing actually is performance. I mean, people trust the service when it truly performs and brings the value which it is supposed to bring. And paradoxically, some other aspects like more participation, even though important, necessarily isn't so strong in actually building trust towards services. Now, if you look at some examples from the Estonian case as well, which is a highly digitalized nation, what you see here is a figure on the 4 most highly trusted public institutions in Estonia. This is survey data from last quarter of 2023. What do you see there? You see the rescue board, you see the emergency response center, you see the police and border guard, whose trust levels are, above 80, close to 90 in some cases, like the rescue board, actually above 90. These are all institutions that respond to emergencies. You call them when you need help and they come and then protect you or save you from a fire accident, for example. But in the 4th place is the tax and customs board, the institution that actually comes and takes your taxes. Now, this is paradoxical, but when you start to think in terms of performance trust, it actually no longer is paradoxical, because the result of this high trust towards institution actually is down to this particular institution actually performing at a very high rate. For example, take a look at this figure. This is the VAT compliance gap across the board in Europe, and you see in the Estonian case that's actually only 1.4%, meaning most taxes are voluntarily paid into the revenue. And that is what trust does. Trust is not a soft and fluffy thing, it actually is functional. We need trust in order for society to function because it makes interactions much more cheaper. And in this particular case, obviously, the number 1 function of the tax and customs board is to collect the taxes for the revenue. But the second important, let's say, function of it is also ensuring a level playing field for businesses, so that everyone has a fair chance of competing against everyone else. And if that is ensured, meaning that actually paying taxes is easy, what happens is also that taxes are paid voluntarily, and as a result, everyone actually benefits. So if you think about that, then it no longer seems paradoxical that the tax and customs board is the 4th highly trusted institution in the Estonian case. So we definitely see a lot of empirical examples where more trust actually makes a society much, much more efficient. It functions efficiently, we don't need to control so much, and as a result, those public institutions which are there to provide us services are able to deliver probably much more complicated and personal solutions as well if they have high performance trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihkel. Very insightful. Moving on. Ville. X-Road is often mentioned as a fundamental building block and the key to success of the digital government or post-digital government in already over 20 countries globally. You have a driver's seat into this process and you see what's going on. What do you think, what have you seen has been the success factor of X-Road in a competitive environment?
Yeah, I think there are a few success factors for X-Road, and one is definitely that it's built by governments for governments, which is really unique. If you look into any that type of digital public infrastructure solutions or data exchange solutions, those are not necessarily always built by governments. And secondly, that X-Road is open source and it's a digital public good. That is something which is really valuable. So it's very unique actually, and it's very difficult to find any other solutions that would be close to what it provides.
That's 2 very important points, and I think we'll be looking forward to hearing your presentation now.
Thank you. Hello. So we are going to talk about the multi-layered future of digital public infrastructures and the future of data exchange and interoperability. So, as my colleagues were already telling, there are certain trends which are impacting the ways how different building blocks are needed by the governments and needed by the societies willing to digitalize and go further and provide, for example, proactive services based on live events, which has been a topic discussed very much, and several other things which are impacting the need for things such as X-Road that Tavi was asking about. Yeah, first of all, the need for data has changed a lot. When I started some 6-7 years ago working with X-Road, it was common that the governments were discussing what is needed for national or regional purposes, what is needed very locally. And the need has changed. It's becoming more and more European here in Europe, that we have cross-border use cases. We have to take into account different Europe-wide legislations and acts. And nevertheless, we must ensure that the data ownership remains, and we have to safeguard individuals' rights to their own data. So these topics are still relevant. And if we think about the national level or regional level, usually it means creating a local interoperable infrastructure. It can be something based on APIs, it can be a very lightweight solution, or it can be a full ecosystem solution such as X-Road. And the biggest difference at national or regional level usually comes with how the solution is addressing the need for a coherent ecosystem, or if it is a solution only meant for exchanging data. So there are differences between the tools and solutions available. Yeah, and the EU's common infrastructure, it's a necessary one. It's usually built using tools such as e-delivery, which is the background technology, for example, for single digital gateway related procedures, which is also the basis for the once-only technical system of the European Union. And it's serving cross-border data transfer, but it's especially serving domain-specific certain use cases. And it's a very strong tool for that, because it allows all the EU member states together to facilitate such data exchange cases in which otherwise it would be very time-consuming to agree case by case on what kind of solutions the data will be exchanged or transferred. And what is happening, data spaces are kind of stealing the ground from the previous solutions. So we are seeing increasingly governments adopting data spaces, we are seeing private sector looking into data spaces, and it's adding a kind of new interoperability layer. So on top of the national one, on top of the existing cross-border one, we are seeing data spaces becoming increasingly important. And in the future, what we believe in our work at NIS is that it's necessary to recognize the different ways of exchanging data. So we must ensure interoperability of different types of systems at different levels. And we also have to remember how we can federate data ecosystems and data spaces. So there is no one tool for all, but it is necessary to find different types of tools for the use cases. And we have illustrated it like this. We can think about the national interoperability, having this national regional level API tool or X-Road or national one's only technical system. At the next level, we see European interoperability, talking about e-delivery, European-wide one's only technical system. And on European and global level, we can see that data spaces is definitely the solution which has the biggest role, because it's not only European, it's global, it's impacting businesses. It has a very broad role and scope compared to the other existing data exchange solutions. And on the top, we can also see the truly global systems. So when we talk about payment systems, certain types of aviation or healthcare or any global sector related solutions, so that's also one kind of additional layer on top of everything we talked about. And we can also see a kind of data sovereignty topic there, like how much it is local, how much it goes under the European legislation, or how global it gets. And nevertheless, the technology stack, I think it's not the key thing here. The key thing is how we are able to agree on the ways of exchanging data. And in all of these layers, we can also see same or similar technologies being deployed. So in my opinion, it's not the question about technology necessarily. It's the question about how we can define, agree, and find a kind of consensus on certain things, like how the future data spaces are going to look like. And it's an ongoing work, and with data spaces there are plenty of things still open, but I wouldn't underestimate the current situation either, and I would say that the data spaces are definitely coming increasingly important. What we have been recently working at NIS, we have been working on X-Road, and for many of our listeners here, X-Road might be very familiar, you know it already. So it's a solution for data exchange and for building your local or national or regional ecosystem for data exchange between organizations. And we are working currently on X-Road 7 Unicorn, which is the current production version, and now moving towards X-Road 8 Spaceship. So the nickname definitely comes from data spaces. And the aim of X-Road 8 is that we take the best of the best, so we keep the X-Road's proven ecosystem model and security, but at the same time we are moving it to the age of data spaces. And the aim is to get a real data space infrastructure provided with X-Road 8 and have some additional features which are adding to the current features. For example, enhanced monitoring and metrics, which we have already started working with, and advanced cloud compatibility are examples of that. And what's going on right now, we are working on a proof of concept in which we are replacing X-Road's access point component, which currently is a security server software. And we are replacing it with Eclipse dataspace components and especially Eclipse dataspace connector. So the aim is to get rid of our custom protocol stack with X-Road and replace it with something which is more of a standard and which is built together between several organizations. And we find it beneficial for everyone. It brings in new features and new opportunities. It's saving time and money. It will be easier to develop things in the future. That's what we assume. And of course, we are in a very early stage, so we are currently working on the technical feasibility mainly and checking how these components could be embedded into X-Road and to replace the current stuff. Anyway, we are expecting results by the end of May or maybe early June the latest. And after that, we will be entering a new phase of proof of concept, trying it out in real ecosystems, like the XT or the Estonian X-Road environment, and similarly Finland's Suomi.fi data exchange layer, hopefully also in our third member Iceland's Straumorin environment in Iceland. So that is the current status. And we welcome everyone to take a look into our progress. We have a landing page for X-Road 8, which you can find through the X-Road product website, xroad.global. And you can find updates on how the proof of concept is progressing. Recently, we just published a blog post about the current status and the work which has already been performed. One interesting aspect related to data spaces and X-Road 8 is that when we talk about data spaces, it's an initiative which has very strong roots in the private sector. And if we look into the history of X-Road, it has come from the public sector. And what I personally hope is that X-Road 8 is a solution which is able to bring together all of the society. It could be a product which is taking the private sector to use the data ecosystem increasingly, but at the same time introducing the new beneficial features coming with data spaces to the public sector. And we are not doing it alone. We are currently discussing with several European countries that are interested in collaborating on X-Road 8 development and interested in trying out the results of our proof of concept. So still, like before, X-Road is not just built by us, X-Road is built together, and we are continuously also listening to the X-Road community. And we also hope, at least hope, that we could ensure a smooth migration to X-Road 8, and we are trying to ensure backward compatibility of X-Road 8 for the users of the current X-Road 7. So, welcome to have a look on X-Road 8 spaceship plans in the website, and I hope you will find the project interesting, and definitely let's communicate and let's build it together. Thank you.
Ville, thank you very much. I mean, it really shows that you've been working with over 20 governments globally, and it's a diverse set of conditions, types of government that you interact with. So it's really interesting to see how some of the principles, I guess, are universal.
Yeah, I would say many principles are actually much more universal than people usually think. Because very often I have got the question that how can it work in so different places? But when I talk with the people who are really implementing X-Road hands-on, I find more similarities than differences.
Absolutely. I think that's true in life in general.
Yes.
Absolutely. So first of all three of you, thank you very much for sharing. I think very insightful and different perspectives. We have also received actually a lot of questions from our audience members, which I understand now is actually already over 40 countries. So that's exciting. We don't have time for all of them, so I've selected a few, and let's see how many of those can we get through. To kick off, Andres, so we have a question here from Kendra. What strategies can ease the transition from, let's say, traditional or analog services into this digital or post-digital era? And Kendra has added a specific element, which I know that we have also faced with some of our partners globally. So sometimes change is difficult, especially when technology potentially replaces people doing their job, meaning that less government employees. Like, what would you recommend to what would be the correct approach here?
There's two questions there. I mean, the first one, that what are the basics there? So it's really the basics of digital government, like also was what Mihkel and Ville were talking about, is really establishing the basic digital infrastructure. So that needs to be set up right. So we're talking about to enjoy this type of services that some of the most digitalized nations, what they're enjoying, it really comes down to government interoperability and, for example, also having, for example, digital identity. If those basic building blocks are not in place, then in reality it's extremely limited what can really be done. So these are the primary limitators that actually define what is the added value of the public services that they can actually add to the society. The second part, that what is the human element in there that might create the resistance or the how to sell that to the society and the government itself. I think it starts really from the communication. If somebody would ask me what is the single secret source of or secret sauce that maybe here. What really helped for the digitalization, I think it was communication. That why are we doing this? What's the added benefit? I mean, they regularly talked about number, for example, currently in the government, that what has been the added efficiency, for example, is 2% of the GDP. That's what we pay for NATO, for example. So what can we do with that for the society? And also, in essence, what's the added value? So, and if you have, for example, if one government authority is able to figure out that, I don't know, for example, that digitalization of the justice system, what that might do, if you're able to describe that impact, which is really not that difficult to do, then it's also much easier to sell.
Definitely, and I would maybe shortly add, I think that one of the defining elements of this is also the individual contribution, the value of the individual contribution. So with digital tools, a single government employee can assist many others, many more, compared to if they would be working on paper. So actually the value of my personal contribution also has the potential to expand greatly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Makes sense. Mihkel, Lily Schmidt from Berlin has a question. And that's something you briefly discussed, but let's try to go a little bit deeper. So what role does communication and transparency play in this post-digital personal government? And perhaps more, how would you approach the communication and transparency from the government point of view towards the citizens and businesses?
Mm-hmm. I would even rephrase it a bit and say, how do you do communication of transparency? Because that's really important. I mean, if the system requirement is that it has to be transparent because people have a right to see who has used their data, then it's an empty right as long as you don't make, don't reduce the time and effort that it takes to actually exercise that right. So one particular way, I mean, you can talk about it, you can technically tick the boxes that yes, we are transparent, but if a person really needs to put in a lot of effort to get a picture who has done what with their data, then actually it's an empty right. I think it's a very good case or a very good example is the Estonian case where this has been actually realized as a data tracker service. So it's not a right, actually it's a service as well. So you can go and really easily, like any other digital service, log into the state portal and go and check who has looked at your data. Yes, if the follow-up, you need to do it yourself to go and see why they have used it, because you simply see who has done or used what particular pieces of your data. But at least exercising the right has been made super simple. So not only to talk about it, but then build a easy way how to exercise that right, like through a service. That definitely is a way how to properly communicate that this right actually is there as well.
Thank you. Some really practical guidance into a potentially very difficult field. Ville, we have something for you, which potentially we could probably have another session for a few hours. It's a little bit philosophical, but Arto asks, having overview and control of the data that the government has from a personal perspective in this post-digital era, does the person have the right to deny government using that data in that relationship?
That's a question I would really love to pass over to Mihkel, who would probably answer it much better than me. So I'm really not a specialist in that topic, and it goes very philosophical, so I would be really happy to skip it.
Well, if I may then, in your current experience working with those over 20 governments, do you have any use cases where in fact people are able to close off access to their data for this service provision?
Yeah, I think this example what Mihkel also gave about this access to data, it's very advanced feature, and it's something that many governments who have deployed some kind of a DPA for a data exchange are just like dreaming about or thinking about. It's not a reality in many countries, as I have understood. Estonia has been doing it pretty nicely. But I don't think it's a common practice, and for many governments the biggest value I have seen coming from data exchange solutions and DPIs for that has been that actually many of paper-based processes or manual processes or very complicated administrative processes have been brought more straightforward and also transparent in the way that at least the message exchange is logged, like in the case of X-Road, that it's possible to get some evidence value and understand that the basic data exchange process itself is okay. And the next step is how you build a solution for letting citizens actually have a control over who has access to their data. But it goes technically maybe to the next level from that.
Mihkel, do you want to add a quick philosophical comment to this topic?
Maybe, because let's say if you look at most public services, then they do have some sort of criteria for eligibility.
Sure.
Meaning a person can actually get that service when they are above or below a certain threshold. So some sort of data needs to be shared because that's written into the law that determines whether a person is eligible or not. Anything on top of that helps personalization, obviously should be in most cases a free choice. So if you can show a person that actually this brings about a much better, higher quality service, I'm pretty certain that most people will take this convenience over data control actually, but they obviously should have the right to deny that access. But some sort of data, by law, they have to share anyway at the moment as well. So if you further digitalize services, you can simply add more value on top of that with the data.
Ville, Anders, for both of you, I think we potentially can draw a logical line here because the X-Road ecosystem is covering both potentially public and private sector. So maybe that's the dividing line at the moment. That maybe that's where the person has the right to choose whether data is being used for a specific service or.
I think absolutely, but also to continue from Mihkel's thought, that is what we strongly believe, and I believe also that there is very strong empirical evidence for this as well, that in generally people trust the services that are more reliable and have added value. So personalized services in reality create exactly that. So the idea behind personalized services, one additional idea behind it is as well that people should have the choice how personalized they wish their services to be. That I should have a choice that if I do not trust the service, then, for example, certain options can be turned off. It uses less personalized data. I get less added value. But if I trust more, I get more added value. And that's actually what nudges the people towards higher levels of trust.
I think that's a very, very, let's say, simple but yet true statement that in the end, what personal government has to deliver both to the public sector and people and businesses is some kind of additional value. If that value is not delivered, of course, the question is why are those services offered? Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing and also for the discussion. Thank you our audience for the questions and joining us. We will have other sessions coming up, so please do continue to check our LinkedIn and other channels, and we hope to see you back soon. Thank you very much.